Trump came to Stephen Colbert's show for revenge. After the DNA scandal that humiliated him on national television, he wanted payback that he walked onto that stage with a plan to destroy Colbert in front of millions. But 20 seconds after his first mocking joke, something unexpected happened. The audience that had been cheering for him suddenly went silent. Then they started booing. Within minutes, Trump's confident grin disappeared, replaced by confusion and then barely controlled rage. What Colbert said next didn't just turn the crowd against Trump. It exposed something Trump had been desperately trying to hide for weeks. And the internet? It exploded instantly. This is the complete story of how one late-night appearance became Trump's most humiliating public moment in years. Before we get into exactly what happened, if you want daily breakdowns of the biggest political drama and viral moments that mainstream media won't show you, subscribe right now that we're uploading every single day with content you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's dive into the full story. The night began like any other at the Late Show. The studio buzzed with anticipation as the audience filed in, excited for what promised to be an explosive episode. Cameras were positioned at every angle, their red recording lights glowing. Microphones hummed with static as sound technicians made final adjustments. People shifted in their seats, murmuring with excitement, checking their phones one last time before the show began. The bright lights cast a golden glow over the set, making every detail visible, every smile, every gesture, every moment would be captured for the thousands watching on screens around the world. The energy was electric, charged with the anticipation of conflict. Everyone knew what was coming. 3 weeks earlier, Trump had brought his son Barron to this very stage to end rumors about his parentage. What was supposed to be Trump's moment of vindication had turned into a disaster when Colbert suggested a DNA test. Barron had agreed. The samples were taken live on air, and when the results came back confirming Trump was indeed Barron's father, Trump had declared victory, but the damage was done. The fact that he needed a DNA test to prove his own son's parentage had become a national joke that late-night comedians mocked him relentlessly. Social media exploded with memes. Even conservative commentators admitted it had been a strategic disaster. Trump was furious. He blamed Colbert for manipulating the situation, for making him look weak, for turning what should have been a simple truth into a media circus. And now, he was back. Not as a guest defending his family, but as a man seeking revenge. Then the doors opened, and Donald Trump appeared. From the first moment, he carried the kind of energy only he could project. His confident grin stretched across his face, and as he waved to the crowd, the room responded with a mixture of cheers, applause, and a few uncertain glances that he moved with purpose, as if every step was carefully choreographed to assert dominance that to him. This was another stage, another chance to command attention, to turn the spotlight onto himself. Trump was in his element, fully aware of the cameras, the crowd, and the power that came with being the center of attention. He wore his signature dark suit and red tie, his hair perfectly styled, his expression one of complete confidence. This was his territory now, or so he believed. He had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment, crafting jokes, practicing his timing, consulting with his team about how to dominate the conversation. He wanted to walk into Colbert's studio and prove that he couldn't be embarrassed, that he was still in control. The audience's reaction was mixed but leaning positive. The Trump supporters in the crowd cheered loudly, some even standing. Others clapped politely, curious to see where this would go. A few sat with arms crossed, skeptical and waiting. Stephen Colbert stood from his desk as Trump approached, extending his hand with his trademark professional smile. "Mr. President, welcome back," Colbert said, his tone friendly but with an undercurrent of caution. Trump shook his hand firmly, holding it just a moment longer than necessary, a power move he'd perfected over decades. "Stephen, it's good to be here," Trump said, his voice carrying to every corner of the studio. "Though I have to say, you put me through quite an ordeal last time." The audience laughed, sensing the tension. "Well," Colbert replied smoothly, "you did get the results you wanted, didn't you?" Trump's smile tightened slightly. "I did. But you made it unnecessarily complicated, don't you think?" They sat down, and immediately Trump leaned back in his chair with the relaxed confidence of someone who believed he controlled the situation. "You know, Stephen," Trump began, I've been thinking about our last conversation, about how you made my family go through a DNA test on national television. Colbert nodded. You agreed to it. I agreed because you put my son in an impossible position. Trump shot back, his tone sharper now. But let's talk about you for a minute. The audience leaned forward. This was what they'd come for. Conflict. Trump pulled out his phone with theatrical flair. See, I've been doing some research, Stephen, and I found something interesting. Colbert's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, do tell. Well, Trump said, looking at his phone screen, it turns out you've been very critical of me over the years. Very, very critical. Hundreds of jokes, thousands of comments. That's my job, Colbert said simply. Right? It's your job, Trump repeated mockingly. But here's what's interesting. You never seem to apply that same standard to yourself. He looked directly at the camera. Did you know that Stephen Colbert's show receives funding from production companies that have financial ties to the Democratic National Committee? The audience murmured that Colbert's smile didn't waver. That's public information, and it's completely standard in the industry. Networks have various financial relationships. It doesn't affect my editorial independence. Trump laughed dismissively. Editorial independence? Stephen, you're a Democratic mouthpiece. Everyone knows it. You attack me every single night because that's what your bosses want. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some Trump supporters cheered, others booed. My bosses, Colbert said calmly, are the audience. And they seem to enjoy when I point out the absurdity in politics, regardless of party. Trump leaned forward, sensing an opening. Absurdity? Let's talk about absurdity. You forced my family through a DNA test to prove something everyone already knew. But here's my question. He paused for dramatic effect. Why don't you take a DNA test, Stephen? The audience went silent. Colbert blinked. Excuse me. A DNA test, Trump repeated, grinning now. You've spent years making jokes about my family, my appearance, my intelligence. So let's see your results. Let's see if you're as perfect as you pretend to be. The logic was nonsensical, and everyone in the room knew it. But Trump was counting on the absurdity being funny to his supporters that a few people in the audience laughed uncertainly. Most sat in uncomfortable silence. Colbert's expression shifted from surprise to something else. Pity, almost. Mr. President, that doesn't make any sense. A DNA test would tell you my ancestry, not whether I'm perfect. And nobody's claiming I am. Trump waved his hand dismissively. See, you can dish it out, but you can't take it. You put my family through a test, but you won't do the same. Because it's completely irrelevant, Colbert said, his voice still calm, but with an edge now. No one is questioning my parentage. No one is spreading conspiracy theories about my family. There's no reason for me to take a DNA test. Sounds like you're scared, Trump said, playing to his supporters in the audience. And that's when it happened. That's when the crowd turned. Boo. It started with just a few voices scattered throughout the audience. Then more joined in. Within seconds, a significant portion of the crowd was booing Trump, not Colbert. Trump, his confident grin faltered that he looked around, clearly caught off guard. What? He said, half laughing, half confused. I'm just asking a fair question. The booing grew louder. Colbert raised his hand, and the audience quieted down. Mr. President, he said, his voice measured and deliberate. I think the audience is reacting to the fact that you came here tonight not to have a conversation, but to try to humiliate me the way you felt humiliated during your last visit. Trump's face reddened. I didn't feel humiliated. You did, Colbert interrupted gently. And I understand that. Having your family subjected to public scrutiny is uncomfortable. But here's the thing. You chose to come on this show. You chose to bring Barron. And when I suggested a test that would definitively end the rumors, your son agreed because he had nothing to hide. The audience applauded. Trump's jaw clenched. But instead of moving forward, Colbert continued. You came back here tonight to try to turn the tables, to make me the target, to deflect from the fact that you needed a DNA test to prove your own son's parentage. The applause grew louder. Trump's confidence was visibly crumbling. Now you're saying I should take a random DNA test for no reason, Colbert said, just so you can feel like you got revenge. That's not how this works. More applause. Trump tried to recover. Stephen, you're twisting my words. I'm not twisting anything, Colbert said firmly. You came here with a plan to embarrass me, and the audience sees right through it. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Trump looked around the studio, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to dominate, to make Colbert look foolish, to get his revenge. Instead, he was being rejected by the very audience he'd tried to win over. Colbert wasn't finished. But let me ask you something, Mr. President. Since you're so interested in DNA tests now, why did it take you 3 weeks to release Barron's results? Trump's eyes widened slightly. What are you talking about? The results were released immediately. Actually, Colbert said, pulling out a paper, they weren't. The lab completed the analysis in 7 days. But the results weren't made public for 10 days. What happened during those 3 days? The audience went silent again, sensing something big. Trump's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. According to this timeline, Colbert held up the paper. The results were completed on a Friday, but they weren't announced until the following Monday. That's 3 full days of delay. He looked directly at Trump. Were you trying to figure out how to spin the results if they weren't what you expected? The crowd gasped. Trump stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. The results proved I was right. Barron is my son. Everyone saw that. They did, Colbert agreed. But the question remains, why the delay? What were you doing during those 3 days? Trump pointed at Colbert, his voice rising. You're making up conspiracy theories now? After everything you put my family through? I'm asking a legitimate question based on documented timelines, Colbert said calmly. If you have nothing to hide, it should be easy to answer. Trump looked at the audience, searching for support, but the faces looking back at him were skeptical, doubtful, turned against him. The momentum had completely shifted. What started as his revenge tour had become his humiliation. Trump made one last attempt to regain control. You know what, Stephen? This was a mistake. Coming back here was a mistake. You're never going to be fair to me. I'm being completely fair, Colbert said. I'm asking you the same kind of questions you ask others all the time. Trump headed toward the exit, his team scrambling to follow. But before he left, Colbert delivered the final blow. Mr. President, you came here tonight to prove you couldn't be embarrassed. But all you've proven is that when confronted with legitimate questions, you run away. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. Trump paused at the door, his face red with barely controlled fury. For a moment, it looked like he might turn back, might try one more time to salvage the situation. But then he was gone, disappearing through the door as his team rushed after him. The studio fell into a stunned silence. Colbert turned to the camera. Well, he said with a slight smile, that was something. The audience laughed, releasing the tension that had built up over the past 10 minutes. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Twitter exploded with reactions. Trump just got destroyed by Colbert again. Why does he keep going back? That 3-day delay question was brutal. The crowd booing him was perfect. News networks played the footage on loop. Political analysts called it one of the most humiliating late-night appearances in political history. Even some conservative commentators admitted Trump had made a strategic error. He walked into that studio thinking he could dominate, one Fox News analyst said. Instead, he got completely outmaneuvered. Trump's Truth Social posts became increasingly angry throughout the night. Colbert is a hack and a liar. The DNA results were released immediately. He's making up fake timelines to save his terrible ratings. The audience was packed with never-Trumpers. Real Americans support me, not some late-night comedian who gets his talking points from the DNC. But the damage was done. The narrative was set. Trump had tried to get revenge and had been humiliated instead. 2 days later, investigative journalists confirmed Colbert's timeline. The DNA results had indeed been completed on Friday, but weren't released until Monday. During those 3 days, Trump's legal team had been frantically reviewing the results and consulting with PR experts about how to present them. They had considered delaying the announcement even longer, possibly trying to suppress them entirely if the results had been unexpected. When reporters asked Trump about the delay, he refused to comment. His press secretary issued a statement saying the timeline was standard procedure for handling sensitive medical information. But the explanation satisfied no one. That the incident became a perfect example of how Trump's attempts at controlling the narrative often backfired. He had gone to Colbert's show seeking revenge. Instead, he had given Colbert another victory and created more questions about his own behavior. This moment taught an important lesson about power and control. When you enter someone else's territory seeking revenge, You better be prepared for them to defend their ground. Trump thought his confidence and charisma would be enough to dominate Colbert. But Colbert had preparation, evidence, and an audience that valued truth over bravado. The result? Another humiliating defeat captured on live television for millions to see. Thanks for watching this complete breakdown. If you enjoyed seeing how this confrontation unfolded, hit that like button, subscribe for daily political drama, and drop a comment below. Why does Trump keep going on late-night shows if they always go badly for him? Let's discuss. See you in the next video.